Welcome to the Chorus One podcast. In this podcast, we explore the emerging open financial system facilitated by scalable, interoperable blockchain networks. Tune in every Monday to dive deep into cutting-edge projects and protocols with Chorus One team members and guests.
Hi and welcome. My name is Brian Crane. I'm one of the co-founders of Chorus One, and we're here today with Gregory Landua from the project Regen Network, which is one of the projects that we are currently running a validator on the testnet, and it's a project that we're very excited about and we're working very closely with on a bunch of different fronts. So I'm really excited today to talk with Gregory a little bit about Regen Network, about their vision and what they're working on. So thanks so much for joining us today, Gregory.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Brian. I'm excited to be able to connect.
First of all, Regen is about sustainability, climate change and ecology. So do you mind sharing with us, how did you become interested and involved in this area, and how did that lead up to start in the creation of Regen Network?
Yeah, it's always an interesting sort of origin story. So I grew up in Alaska. So I think from the time of being a child, I was pretty connected to nature and kind of in love with the natural world. So my dad was a chemical engineer, so very kind of rational sort of scientific approach to life and working in the petroleum industry. And my mom was a wildlife biologist. So I think I kind of got this sort of fusion of what is a practical way to take care of the natural world from the beginning. And basically, I've been very stubborn about being 100% focused on that my whole life. So I studied environmental science, and then I focused on this discipline called permaculture, which is designing human systems that interact with ecology in a way that increases ecological health. So that's farming, energy, waste systems. And I particularly have focused on agriculture and agroforestry in my sort of permaculture discipline. And for many years, made my living helping support people to sort of regenerate agroecosystems or agricultural ecosystems, and had a very successful business doing that. But at a certain point, it became clear that we're sort of digging holes in the sand, or sort of Sisyphean task where you push the boulder up the hill and it comes down every day, because the problems that the natural world are facing are actually systemic, and they relate to our broader economy and the way we organize our economy. And at a certain point, we sort of I intersected through some of my colleagues with the crypto and blockchain world. And I can talk a little bit about how that is, but it became super clear. I think it's sufficient to say it became super clear that there was something pretty powerful about sort of the public good created by a distributed ledger and creating transparency, and how that actually transcends many of the systemic issues that as a species we face that are leading to climate change around sort of ecological health, and having that be the foundation of agreements and economic relationships. So that's sort of in a nutshell how I came to be here. I sort of transitioned out of a focus on sort of agroecological design and permaculture design and consulting, and into a focus sort of moonlighting as a tech and decentralized technology entrepreneur and blockchain entrepreneur. I think about 2.5 years ago, started really just hey, I'm dedicated, I'm focused, I need to learn a lot. The nice thing is permaculture is a design science. And so myself and other people on the team have a sort of rigor around designing systems and complex systems. So that translates pretty well to technology, actually. So yeah, Regen Network has been around for a while. I gave a talk at DevCon 3 in Cancun that went really well. And that was kind of part of the genesis of all this. I mean, we'd been cranking away for a little while, but that was part of the genesis of the Regen story.
Cool. I mean, I totally agree with you. I think this is one of the things that excites me about blockchain, is this potential of solving these massive problems and being able to collaborate and create these collaborative structures on a global scale. And so I was really excited when I found out about Regen Network and how you guys were approaching that. But so for people who haven't heard about Regen Network, what's the high-level summary of what Regen Network is and what it's trying to accomplish?
I'll answer that in two different layers, sort of the how and the why. So the why is creating a platform where people can make agreements about ecological outcomes and health, or ecological state, to use the sort of like scientific way that we approach it. Why is that important? Because that's what's missing. People making an agreement about carbon cycle outcomes to reverse climate change or water quality. These sorts of things are just sort of, we think, a fundamental building block of a functional human economy. So that's our why. The how is creating sort of auditable, transparent scientific rigor about claims about ecological state or ecological health outcomes. So making it possible for everyone to know, like, who said what, when, and how are they making that claim? And that's sort of like the fundamental structure of what we're doing. And then there's a lot of fancy sort of integrations with amazing Earth observation and sort of sensors coming online and third-party support with people who've been doing this for many years. But that's the basics.
And so let's just say that Regen Network succeeds beyond your wildest dreams and the network finds tremendous amount of adoption. If you look forward, let's say that happens 15 years from now, can you describe to us, what does the world look like and what does Regen Network look like at that point?
Well, I think our world probably looks a lot different. I think having ecological accounting and an ecological agreement connected to every single transaction and economic relationship is something that essentially has to happen and will through Regen Network and perhaps other sister projects, because it's going to take a whole movement. We don't claim to have the one solution to rule them all, really. So that's one change, is accounting for ecological health in all of our transactions, contracts, and agreements. And how that translates to Regen Network is I see a thriving ecosystem, multi-layered, everything from the base layer of, you could think of the base layer in a couple different ways, but let's just say the anchor participants of our network are validators like Chorus One, who are providing this sort of public good of a durable, distributed, secure, censorship-resistant record of ecological health and agreements about ecological health, right? All the way to people providing data, verifiers, the land stewards themselves who are caretaking the land, that the rights to which are being agreed upon, like the rights to the carbon cycle outcomes or the rights to the water cycle. So a thriving, beautiful community of participants, all of whom are coordinated not by some central committee or some complex bureaucracy, but instead are coordinated by having the shared value of the currency that secures that network, the network staking token, the Regen token. And so sort of bringing that to bear to coordinate this enormous complexity is how I see this all unfolding, and something I'm very excited, because what emerges out of that is a currency that is essentially backed by the collective work of a bunch of people focused on ecological health. So you could say it's a currency backed by ecological regeneration. And in 15 years, I think that's going to be one of the most important currencies in the world.
One of the things that's cool about Regen Network also is that already today you guys are working on some pilot projects. So do you mind walking us through, let's say, two of them that you're currently working on or that kind of in the making projects building on Regen Network?
Yeah, sure. One of the ones that's near and dear to my heart and pretty exciting is we have a pilot in Ecuador with a cacao cooperative of about 1,200 family farms who are growing cacao and selling it in the marketplace for buyers to value cacao produced by members of the cooperative that has higher ecological performance. So we have this sort of scientific methodology to essentially like measure ecological performance. In this case, we're thinking biodiversity and carbon cycle outcomes are the two ones that we're thinking about. And we have buyers who are willing to pay because they realize, A, they can gain a market premium themselves, and B, it is a more resilient, healthy place for them to source from. So that means that cacao will be there in the longer term. So there's good business reasons to do this. Yeah, are basically paying farmers a premium over organic and fair trade to have regenerative, verified cacao in the marketplace. So that's pretty exciting. So that's one.
So just to clarify that, does that basically mean that, you have this cooperative, you have 1,200 farmers in there, and, one farmer, they really do an exceptional job at this, and then that gets measured and they receive sort of an extra payment for that. And maybe somebody else doesn't, and they then receive basically less money, or they don't receive this additional compensation for, the positive ecological effect they've had.
Exactly. And what that does is it creates sort of like healthy competition amongst the farmers to have the healthiest farms. In kind of a cool, similar way to what I see happening in the Cosmos ecosystem, where the competition between validators to be the most secure, be the most energy efficient, whatever it might be, actually leads to a healthier network. In this case, that sort of friendly competition between the farmers leads to a healthier cooperative, healthier farms, healthier outcomes.
Yeah, super awesome. And then what was the second use case you wanted to mention?
I mean, there's so many. I'm going to choose to focus again on a project in South America, which we're partnering with the Rainforest Foundation on, which is a super cool organization. And we're sort of creating this direct payment system for indigenous stewardship of the Amazon rainforest, so that both there's sort of like this alarm system so that the indigenous communities know from satellite information if illegal logging is taking place, but also so that donors know that those same communities are in fact stewarding them. So the data serves a dual purpose. It's useful for the community to steward its landscape, and it's useful for the donor to understand that forest is intact and healthy. Right? And we're basically setting up an agreement between donors that the Rainforest Foundation is bringing in and directly to this indigenous community to steward the rainforest. And that's a kind of a cool agreement type, I think. I want to just shout out that we started with a strong focus on soil health and the soil carbon sequestration potential. And there's a bunch of really awesome stuff going on in that arena as well. But I think for the purpose of this podcast, let's not get too into all of those details.
Yeah, and maybe that's kind of a place to also bring up one of the ways that we have been working together. So when I would say one of the things that, personally I've been interested in a long time, or one of the reasons I was interested in proof of stake was because of the much higher energy efficiency, and because it just didn't seem to be sustainable or possible to say we're going to have all of these blockchains and use blockchains as the foundation of running kind of the economy of the future, if that's all based on proof of work. And so that was one of the reasons why, Tendermint and Cosmos were interested in proof of stake in general. And so I think we already had in the first course retreat over almost a year and a half ago, in early 2018, I think we had like a brief conversation back then about, it would be kind of cool if we could like offset our carbon footprint. And then at some point we, it's kind of been on there on our list of things to do. And then recently, the last, maybe 2 months, we spent with your help on estimating our carbon footprint. And we're going to also work with you guys on offsetting that. So, that course will be kind of a carbon positive. So we're going to have another episode coming up here that I'm going to do together with Felix, where we'll talk about that in more detail. So stay tuned for that. But that's just also one of the ways we've been working together. So it's one thing I'm super excited about.
Yeah, me too. It's been a really fun conversation. And I think there's a lot of layers of complexity when we start to think about, sort of taking responsibility to balance our carbon budget as a business or as a community or as an individual. And I really applaud Chorus One for taking leadership in that conversation for the Cosmos community more broadly. I'm really excited to see where this is going.
Totally. So we've spoken about two kind of concrete use cases that you guys are already working on. What are some of the maybe second or third order use cases that, will become possible once, that might have like, really massive impact, but that, maybe need the Regen Network to already be, kind of this vibrant ecosystem?
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's where it starts to get really fun, I think, is to see what becomes possible. Just again, to sort of set the stage, if you think of a censorship resistant, globally available database of ecological health that no one can impunge, right? And that exists around the world that people can then use to make agreements and a full-fledged sort of smart contracting framework around that. Okay, what becomes possible on our platform? Well, one of the things I'm very excited about is transforming the relationship between sort of natural capital, in quotes, and how the market values, exchanges the rights and access to ecosystem services and functions. So what does that mean? What I mean is, how do we value the positive benefit of a healthy farm that's sequestering more carbon than it's emitting, right? So it's a net sequester in a time that we need to pull down carbon back into living systems. Or how do we value a forest that's providing water for a town, right? And that all of the people get their drinking water from that forest. So I think what becomes possible is this transformative relationship where, through tokenization, where the underlying ecological health can essentially be assessed, and we can create a representative sort of derivative token that can be exchanged that represents rights to some of the outputs. And it could be water or carbon or anything that's happening that's providing this economic public good, which up until now was impossible to account for, leading to this okay, well, let's just degenerate and degrade and extract all of the value out of that forest, for instance. So instead, we can trade the fruits of that intact ecosystem in a way where that instrument, that token, is only valuable if the underlying ecosystem is being stewarded. And that currently doesn't exist. There is no way to do that in the current way that carbon markets and other things are functioning. So I get really excited about the potential of creating these sort of local and then bioregional and then global indexes where there's sort of these derivatives of ecological health being traded, and they can form into an index together. And essentially you could create a global health index and a financial instrument, basically, where we can all go long planetary regeneration. And those people who want to short planetary regeneration can, and the rest of us can buy it at a discount and then keep working hard to coordinate our efforts to regenerate our ecosystem. So that's it.
Yeah, that's super cool. And one of the reasons why I like this so much is that you can think of blockchains as really enabling creating markets where previously markets weren't possible. So, let's take the example of public goods, right? Which in traditional economics, right, you say, okay, public goods, like markets don't really work as a mechanism there. And then with blockchains, we can basically create these crypto economic systems where you can fund public goods. And if you, of course, think of externalities like environmental externalities, some factory pollutes the environment, creates costs for everybody else, then again, that's a way in which traditionally markets didn't really work, or they don't really work today. And that's also a place where, Regen Network can potentially come in and say, okay, now we create a functioning market and create, the proper incentives so that, if somebody pollutes the environment, they also pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's sort of like getting in the ground floor from the market perspective. The current market for ecosystem services, or that is to say, agreements about the public goods that are produced by healthy ecosystems, is currently $36 billion last year. That is predicted to increase to at least $1 trillion over the next 10 to 20 years as commitments to climate solutions and the business fundamentals of not being able to continue to extract resources at a rate that sort of precludes the healthy functioning of business in the future. You just think of it that way. Discounted cash flow is not working. So we're really excited about that. I think what's really an important piece, I think it is good also to have healthy skepticism and just awareness. Again, that's one of the amazing things about bringing proof of stake blockchain, and not just sort of blockchains more generally, but the social coordination of a community of stakeholders, is that also there's no real, I guess the risk of like the tyranny of the market or the sort of oligarchy of mercantile approaches to things, I think is very low, because all of the source code is open And people can choose other ways of approaching this if they would like, which is really, I think, kind of revolutionary. So we can find the market fit where sort of creating these encapsulated markets in places that they didn't exist to help coordinate the provisioning of public goods or common pool resources to participants and trading rights on that. We can generate a huge economic engine that is directly tied to ecological regeneration, which is what I'm passionate about. But also, if there's places where the market just doesn't quite fit, if there's certain communities or cultures where that's not appropriate, what's cool is they can fork the code and the approach, and they can create other agreement types and other ways of sort of approaching and encapsulating, coordinating action. So there's no sort of like imposition of one system across the whole board. And that's something we're really passionate about. Like, there is this amazing, exciting sort of economic flywheel, and there's a lot of cases where that may not fit. But the cool thing is the work that we're doing, we hope, will also benefit the communities who want to step up and create their own sort of rules for governing these resources that are either non-market or very conscientious about how the market relationships are designed and protected. And it can go both ways, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's speak a little bit about the Regen token. What's the role of the Regen token? And I should also make a disclaimer here. I should have probably mentioned this at the beginning that I'm personally investing in the Regen token, so I'm biased from that side. But yeah, tell us, like, what's the role of the Regen token in the Regen network?
Yeah, so the role of the Regen token is similar to that for your listeners, I think many of whom are familiar with the Atom in the Cosmos Hub. It's a staking token. It's meant to secure the network. I guess the analogy is sort of like a virtual ASICs miner, but I think that's only one element of what a good staking token does. We've essentially cloned the Cosmos token economics with some very minor tweaks, and mostly we're wanting to stay in relationship with our validator community. Any innovations are ones that the community feels are both good for the larger ecosystem and sort of healthy for our use case. But we've sort of been, I mean, if you can say this, none of it's very conservative, but we've been conservative in our token design and sort of taking something that we can reason through and we can see is sort of working in a particular way and use that to secure the network. So what it represents essentially is the ability to earn block rewards and fees for the service of securing the distributed ledger of ecological data and claims. And that's what it represents, the Regen token.
And what's the timeline and the roadmap? Like, what have you guys built so far and what's coming up?
We've built a fair bit. So we have our first testnet up and running. We're just about to go through a series of fun governance and upgrades in the testnet to test some things out that we're also going to be pushing upstream into the Cosmos Hub and Cosmos SDK. We're looking at a end of Q3, maybe Q4 mainnet launch. And most of the, why I'm a little bit like I don't want to give a hard date has to do with the dance of social coordination and creating a very strong validator community, testing the particular things that are important for security and making sure that we have audits and other things. We always need to have a little bit of room to bring together a group that is decentralizing and creating this network trust. So I think, as we've learned, that takes a little bit of time and attention to get that all right. But we have everything in terms of like the code that's being generated, the functionality, the partnerships. Everything is ready if we keep a good rhythm on the social coordination to have Regen Network live and running and ecological data and agreements happening on mainnet before the end of this year. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, super cool. And yeah, just for our listeners who are interested in this, if you kind of want to be part of this and want to support Regen and own some staking token when the network goes live, you guys are doing basically token sale, although not a public token sale, presumably. So I think it is non-Americans and accredited investors who are able to participate.
That's right. So we have a private sale for qualified investors. And so what that means is, depending on your jurisdiction, what the definition of being sort of a qualified or sophisticated investor to invest in a security, or if it's not considered a security, in the US it is. That's how we're running our sale. So, I mean, we could sort of go down a whole rabbit hole right there, but in a nutshell, that just means that if you are able to participate and sort of pre-purchase the rights to the token because you're qualified, and as Brian said, in the US, that means you're an accredited investor. In Europe, you can also be sort of like a sophisticated investor, and the bar is lower to be considered accredited, sort of the financial bar as well. We're running sort of 2 phases of the private sale. I think we're getting pretty close to subscription of the first phase. So if people are interested, you should definitely reach out soon if you'd like to participate in sort of like the lowest discount. The other innovative thing that we're doing in relationship to our sale is sort of like deepest discount for the longest lockup. So that's most logical, I think, for the validator community and really people who are building their own personal economics around staking and securing proof of stake networks, right? And so people who are like reasoning about that and setting up their own sort of portfolio of projects around staking networks and the utility that brings and the economic benefit that that brings. We give a deeper discount for people who want to basically go long and have their tokens staked for a 3-year lockup. And so actually that's been enormously popular. Basically, everyone in the first phase is choosing the 3-year lockup, which I think is sort of indicative of the strength of the community and the strength of the conviction that proof of stake is here to stay and it's transformative. And I think the strength of conviction that running a distributed ledger for ecological applications and a specific zone that dedicates to that is both economically viable and something that we just need as a planet. And so I think there's a lot of sort of like conviction coming through, which I'm super grateful for and really excited to sort of like have that coalescing.
Yeah, so thanks so much for expanding on that, Gregory. So yeah, if people are interested, just reach out to Gregory. We'll have, of course, links in the show notes to the Regen Network website. You can also ping us on the course Telegram or some other place and we can connect you. And of course, once Regen launches, we'll be running a validator there. So also you'll be able to stake with Course One if you'd like. With that, thanks so much for joining us today, Gregory. Super fascinating project. Really excited to be able to support you guys and to see where it goes. So yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Brian, and to the whole Chorus One team. A lot of gratitude for the great work you guys are doing for the community, bringing us all together around the topics that make the Cosmos ecosystem stronger and hopefully, in the case of Regen, the whole world a better place. So thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Chorus One podcast. Visit chorus.one for more information about our work. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to stay tuned on new episodes airing every Monday.